Some albums get celebrated the moment they're released. Others take decades for listeners to recognize their true value. And then there are albums like Jethro Tull's Roots to Branches, records that slip quietly under the radar. So you're probably wondering, why am I reviewing Roots to Branches by Jethro Tull? Two reasons. First of all, it has an anniversary in September, so I usually like to do anniversary reviews. Secondly, I kind of have this personal connection with this album. And it all goes back to the year 2022 when I got a really bad case of COVID and I was in quarantine for about a month. And I was pretty much locked away in a room with just my phone and music, and that's all I had. And by the way, you're probably wondering why I'm wearing this mask. It has nothing to do with the fact that I'm talking about my COVID story. It just has to do with the fact that I'm undergoing a dental procedure and I'm having my teeth fixed, and there's this gigantic gap like in between my mouth, and probably doesn't look too great on camera, so that's why I've been masking up in my videos. But basically, back to the COVID story. So I was listening to a lot of music, listening to a lot of Jethro Tull, and I think it was around the time when they released that new album, that comeback album, which was called From 2022, released in January. I forgot the name. I'll stick it under there because the name slipped my mind. But I'm listening to lots of Jethro Tull. I ended up preparing a ranking video and I'm listening to all the albums. But there was something about this album, Roots to Branches, that really connected with me. It was different. It didn't sound like any other Jethro Tull album. And it just gave me this very peaceful feeling because I was in pretty bad shape. I was hooked up to this oxygen tank and all of that. So I wasn't in good shape. So this connected with me, and there was especially like one song, which I'll talk about later, that kind of gives me this very peaceful feeling when I listen to it. And even still, every time I re-listen to it or go back to this album, it gives me this very peaceful feeling. And I'll explain why throughout this video. But first, we have to go through a little history. I'm not going to give a complete history of Jethro Tull, but I'm just going to briefly go over Jethro Tull so you understand that this band, I would say they have like three different periods. First is the 60s and 70s, which is their peak period, their best albums. You got Aqualung, Thick as a Brick, Songs from the Woods. That is when they released their best stuff. In the 80s and 90s, I'm going to call it their middle period, only because they had a comeback period. In the past few years, they released 3 albums in the past like 5 years or less than that. But I'm going to call this the middle period, the 80s and the 90s. The 80s was their, I would say, worst period because they started doing a lot of synth and electronic. They released Crest of a Knave, and that won a Grammy for the best hard rock metal performance, beating out Metallica. So that was like a big deal back then. In the 90s, kind of a weird time for them. They only released 3 albums. They released Catfish Rising, which is more bluesy and stripped down, which was okay, kind of forgettable. But in 1995, they released Roots to Branches, and that's the album I'm talking about. Because I think it gets overlooked and forgotten because it's from that middle period of Jethro Tull, which they never really released anything great in that period. And I think this is the only exception, which is why I'm making this video today. So why is this a great album and what makes it so special? It's different because it has this world music sound. Lots of Middle Eastern vibes, Indian music mixed with their typical folk rock. You got great songs. The title track, Roots to Branches, has these exotic melodies and flute playing, Martin Barr's guitar playing. Then you have songs like Rare and Precious Chain with this pulsing rhythm and Eastern-inspired riff. You have This Free Will. This has a little bit of that progressive arrangements with a more cinematic edge. Then you have more of their stripped down stuff. Usually Jethro Tull likes to have acoustic songs. So you have Stuck in the August Rain, and the song which I really connected with called At Last Forever. It's a great album. It's epic. It's comparable to one of their 70s prog masterpieces. The best song on the album. I would even go as far as to say as the best Jethro Tull song from this middle period, which is the 80s and 90s. So, who do we have on this album? Of course, we have Ian Anderson. At this time, he's fascinated with global traditions. He's really interested in world music, so that's why he even said that this is one of his most personal albums. Ian Anderson was also interested in age, spirituality, reflection, because I don't know how old he was in 1995, but I'm pretty sure he's going past middle age. And usually when you get to this point in life, you always have the idea of mortality in the back of your mind. So I think that's what he was going through. On guitars, we have Martin Barre. He's been with the band since 1969. Awesome guitarist. And he's great because he can play rock music, he plays heavy riffs, but he really embraced this melodic and textured world music. So he was able to adapt his style. So there are some songs where they do get a little heavy, but it's Martin Barre. You know it's him, it's his guitar. And that's why he's just an awesome guitar player. The rhythm section is Dave Pegg on bass and Doane Perry on drums, where, they're really good. I think they were in the band during this middle period, which I'll call it. But when this album came out, it really wasn't embraced. It didn't really do well. Critics gave it mixed reviews. Fans were kind of divided. So I think it was the 90s. The 90s were difficult. There was grunge. I mean, people weren't really into Jethro Tull. Maybe they had a few hardcore fans who were into it. But I think a lot of people were still expecting them to release another Aqualung, another Thick as a Brick. So that's why it didn't really do as well. But I think over the years, this album has really held up very well. I think many fans consider it one of the band's best works of the 90s. Me personally, I think it's their best album of the maybe 80s and 90s in that middle period, which I keep calling it. So I don't know. Let me know why you think it's a forgotten gem of the 90s. I think it's overlooked. I think people were expecting something different. Maybe Jethro Tull didn't really get a lot of attention in the 90s. Maybe people wanted something more of their 70s material. It was completely different. It's one of those albums that sounds very unique. The one that came after this I think it's called jtull.com, which was when they first had a website. That kind of had the same style, but it's not as good. That album's okay, but it's not really one of my go-tos. And then after that, they didn't release another album for a really long time. They released one Christmas album and then nothing for 19 years. And then the Zealotine, that's the album I couldn't think of before. That's the one that came out a couple of years ago. I'm a fan of that one, but that's another one of my COVID albums. But anyway, let me know. Check out my ranking. I'm going to put my ranking there because I think that you can see how I rank everything, where you're going to notice that I like a lot of 70s albums, but I forgot where I put this one, but I know I ranked it pretty high. So you're going to see that. Thanks for watching. Give this video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe, comment. All this stuff helps me. So if you want to see more stuff, don't miss a video. Hit the bell icon and all of that good stuff. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one.